This is the EMS Research Vlog and Podcast, where we talk about the research-related issues that matter to those who work or study in the area of emergency medical services. Your host is Bram Duffy, who is a paramedic and communications professor.
Welcome to the EMS Research Vlog and Podcast from the studio here in Houston, Texas. I want to start out by drawing your attention to our website where you can check out anything that's show related when you go to professorbram.com. That's professorbram.com. At the website, you can find the latest show, see my talks in the media, order the latest book, and also look at how to participate in research. This is all stuff that can help you grow in the world of EMS research. Like right now, I have a research study open for first responders. So if you don't mind being interviewed by me, then go to my website at professorbram.com and click on the current research tab to apply.
There's a substance called pharmaceutical albumin, which contains special fats, and this might help in certain situations. So it's really out there and new and cool. So I wanted to talk about it as soon as we could. This is all recent. In a study with rats, researchers explored whether different types of albumin, both from cows and humans, could help improve survival after severe blood loss. So they compared these albumins to see if they could improve things like heart function and reduce the need for additional fluids. So the study found that all types of albumin seem to help with heart function and reduce the need for extra fluids. But there wasn't much difference between them. And it was kind of interesting because the albumins didn't cause the expected dehydration or worse lung conditions, but they did seem to increase how the protein was lost from the blood. So maybe like affecting overall the blood vessels health. So all this finding suggests that using 25% human serum albumin might be a promising way to help soldiers recover in tough conditions where immediate medical care just isn't available. So as a paramedic and a researcher, to me, this is really exciting and new. And I reached out and found the author. His name is Alex Penn, and he's a researcher who wrote this article. It's 25%. The article name is 25% human serum albumin improves hemodynamics and prevents the need for nearly all pre-hospital resuscitation in a rat model of trauma and hemorrhage. This was put out in June 2024 of Shock. And today we have him here. And so first, Dr. Penn, I'd like to just welcome you to the show and give you a chance to give the long version, to tell everybody about yourself before we get to hear more about your research work.
Well, I'm currently a research scientist with the U.S. Air Force 59th Medical Wing Science and Technology Office. My background is actually as a bioengineer. That's what my Ph.D. is in. So I'm not an MD type. I'm definitely the preclinical research type. And I should say that everything that I will talk about today is my opinion alone. It's not to be construed as the opinion of the government or the DoD or the Defense Health Agency.
I know we're still talking about your introduction, but I want to say I'm surprised that you're telling me that the military does research. I thought so much of everything was outsourced, And so to even hear that, hey, there's some real stuff going on, I'm okay.
Oh, yeah. No, there's a lot of research in the military, especially in the areas of trauma. And obviously the military has a great deal of reason to care about, hemorrhage and trauma. That's, in combat situations, hemorrhage is by far the biggest, source of mortality. So it's something they very much care about. And unfortunately, on the civilian side, it's, there's no NIH Institute of Trauma. for example. So, if you're trying to research that, the military is actually one of the best places to go to because they care about it and they're willing to put forward the money to support that research.
Uh-huh.
So if you are trying to do, critical care pre-hospital, like, yeah, absolutely, you should be looking at, the military. You should probably be coming to San Antonio, uh, and because we've got the 59th Medical Wing that I work for, the Institute of Surgical Research, um, and there's just places all over that are doing this sort of work. So the military definitely is has a vested interest in trying to figure out the best ways to take care of people that have been injured. Um, so that's actually how I ended up here. um, anyway, just to get back to it, I was saying, so I joined the Institute of Surgical Research and was trying to track what happens if fatty acids do hit the bloodstream, and one of the things that we realized just in vitro work was that they can cause hemolysis. They can cause red blood cells to break down. And the study that I did there was the precursor to the study that you wanted to talk about today. And so a lot of that is all tied in together. And so we'll definitely, I'm sure, get into that. But I will say, just to follow, the rest of my personal story, I was at ISR for about 3 years, maybe 2.5, and then got snagged by the Air Force. And so I've been working with the 59th Medical Wing, their Science and Technology Office, uh, pretty much along the same lines, though we're also trying to sort of expand, at least, my personal portfolio of research into other areas because there ties into traumatic brain injury, uh, especially when we start talking about the albumin. I'll be able to sort of talk about that a little bit. And besides just hemorrhage being able to cause fatty acids coming from the gut, other major trauma types like large bone fractures, burns, those are all, I'm not sure how it exactly worked with sepsis, but the research suggests that it also happens in sepsis, that you get an influx into the circulation of these detergents.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're just really starting to see what possible effects that could be having. And it's turning out that maybe only one of them is hemolysis. So there may be other things going on. One of the big hot topics right now in trauma research is endotheliopathy of trauma, coagulopathy of trauma. A lot of times it takes polytraumas to actually get these to show up in preclinical animal models. So it's a tough thing. We don't really have good tools for it yet. So I'm very excited that at least there are some indicators, some of which, like you mentioned one earlier, that that fatty acids could be causing protein leakage,
Mm-hmm.
which is another way of saying endotheliopathy. Like the endothelial cells are not supposed to be letting protein leak out of your circulation. Like basically protein's the only thing that keeps you having plasma, right? Mm-hmm. If you didn't have that oncotic pressure to keeping fluid in your blood vessels, you would literally have just red blood cells as a sludge and getting stopped, mm-hmm. and you'd have no flow at all. So that protein staying where it's supposed to be is pretty important.
And that's what you're an expert in, right? That's what you research. That protein.
Is what I'm researching. Okay. Is try to do this. Yeah.
So what I want to do now is I want to ask you the big question. And so I'm interested in your research study. So please tell me about your research study, but I'd like for you to tell me in a way so that at the end of the story, you end with saying, so in the future, maybe paramedics can give this miracle drug in the field that can save lives, right? So a lot of us are emergency room doctors and field paramedics. And so, like we're maybe at point A, but we also want to hear about point Z. So, give us the whole deal.
So I'll give you a little preview of that right now,
Yeah.
which is that um, pharmaceutical albumin, which is what's already out there. So don't get me wrong. Like the human serum albumin that I use in this paper is just what's already on the market. You can get it right now. What is not considered is the fact that it contains huge amounts of fatty acids. People only think of it as being albumin. They don't think of it as being albumin plus super physiologic levels of fatty acids. And so the consequences of that have been mixed. So I would
Can you
say
tell me more about
yes.
that? Can you tell me
Yeah.
more
Oh,
about?
yeah. Absolutely. Wait, more about what exactly?
Like, can you like dumb it down a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first off, why is it even there? Um, One of the really nice things about albumin, and there's a whole bunch of nice things about it, is that it can be sterilized, right? So, when you're dealing with blood products, every other blood product, you have to worry about the fact that could be transmitting a disease.
Yeah.
Hepatitis was a huge problem, and back in like World War II, for example. So the fact that you can actually use heat sterilization of albumin means that you don't have to worry about that. Plus, it's can be temperature stable. You don't have to keep it refrigerated. So it's very great logistically. So for the military, of course, you really care about that. If you're going to cold environments, if you're going to really hot environments, if you're having to ship a ton of this stuff of it, a ton of it, and you don't want to have refrigeration on your planes, to handle all that. It's really, really great. The reason why you can heat sterilize it is because they dump in all those fatty acids. The fatty acids are naturally bound to the albumin. Like albumin is the protein that actually transports them in the body. Whenever they're not part of a fat, whenever they're not esterified into a full fat or oil or phospholipid, when they're just a fatty acid, they're being carried usually on the back of the albumin. And so there's a ton of binding sites for it. And what people have done is they use that to stabilize the protein against heat denaturation. Right? If you heat up a protein to 60 degrees for however long they do it for albumin, I want to say it's hours. Normally that just totally degrades the protein, but because you have these fatty acids sticking on in various places, it's like scaffolding that holds it together. But the problem is they don't remove it later. They leave it there. And you've got so much of it that as soon as you put that albumin into the bloodstream, those fatty acids say, oh, I would rather stick it myself into that cell membrane over there. Like, why have 13 of us on this one albumin molecule when really thermodynamically, you only really want two. The rest of them will just go off and do their thing and go somewhere else. And so that's the consequences I'm talking about. And when it comes to
Well, you're studying it in a way so that you have human and cow, right? So is there some reason, like, is there some special cocktail mix that we're going for?
So
I mean, I like steak, but
yeah, no. So I was not going specifically for bovine albumin as a treatment for people. I need to clarify that.
okay.
The reason why I had the albumin from bovine as a group was because in the previous rat study, I'd used bovine albumin. And the problem was everything was done with that bovine albumin. And the point of this study was actually to say that what we learned from that previous study still applies
Okay.
to human albumin.
So you were
So
making more
that's
steps up. So you're trying not to like take a full step. You were getting the mini steps in there to
it.
to
Yeah, it
to
was so,
connect it.
so that I
Okay.
could make some equality, and so I could say that,
Yeah.
hey, human albumin does the exact same thing that bovine albumin did in this previous study. The behavior is the same. So when you look at the results of the previous study, you can apply it to pharmaceutical human albumin, even though in that previous study I didn't use pharmaceutical human albumin.
And this kind of thinking is what gets you multiple awesome publications. Heck yeah, though,
Good
right?
side effect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, but what I have a bad habit of spiraling, and like get it from my mom. Um, what I wanted to get at was that um, there's good sides and there's bad sides to this. Full hemolysis, you get cell-free hemoglobin released, right? If you have even damaged cells, though, damaged cells no longer line up perfectly in as they travel through blood vessels, and they're more likely to go closer to the vessel walls. So in either case, you have hemoglobin going closer to the vessel walls than it normally does.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the weird things about hemoglobin, weird, that may not be the right word. One of the things about hemoglobin is that it scavenges nitric oxide, which is a vessel dilator.
Mm-hmm.
Vessel dilation is probably the last thing you want when you're down a lot of blood, right? You need your vessels to be constricted so that you've got venous return, so that you can keep your heart pumping and have something to pump, right? You have to get the blood back. And so you have to maintain that constriction. So our thinking is that by scavenging a little bit of this nitric oxide, we're making it easier for the body to keep those blood vessels constricted. So in the short term, that pre-hospital period, that could actually be a really beneficial thing, right? It keeps you alive to the hospital, because the conditions that you have to work with pre-hospital are so different from after the point that you have surgical control of the bleed, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you've got surgical control of the bleed, you can pump as much fluid as you need in there and nothing's going to go flying out. Before that, you've got to worry about too much pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You put in too much pressure and you could pop clots.
Damage. Yeah.
And yeah, and so that's why they have this thing called permissive hypotensive resuscitation, where you let the blood pressure be low, which unfortunately means you're also letting the individual be somewhat hypovolemic,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're not, even if their blood pressure goes up, that doesn't mean that the volume of blood that's circulating is actually back to where it was.
But I mean, is it like, how much does hemoglobin really equate to the volume? Because it's still the same blood, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah. So it has nothing to do with volume. It has everything to do with that nitric oxide scavenging that's
Yeah.
changing what the blood vessels are doing. Is, if the blood vessels are staying tight, then pressure stays up even with a lower volume. You don't need to have full volume if your blood vessels stay tight. If they start to relax, that's when you can have blood pressure start to drop,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's the potential good side of what having these detergents floating around is. The bad side is that protein leakage. We really don't want that to happen. Another word for that is basically edema. When you start having that happen, you've increased permeability of your blood vessels, you're losing fluid, you're now having protein across the out of the blood vessels and pulling fluid with it. So all of that is really bad. And especially if there's TBI. If you've
Tell me
got
why.
well, the whole deal with traumatic
Traumatic
brain
brain injury?
injury,
Yeah.
right, is that if you've got a fixed volume in your skull, right? So if a whole bunch of fluid starts swelling up the tissues of your brain, the real problem is that your intracranial pressure starts going through the roof, and it actually gets so high that it actually compresses the blood vessels. So you can have so much swelling that you stop blood from getting into your brain.
So are you saying that someday the paramedics are going to need to be cracking skulls open and giving them an injection of albumin, and then we're going to be good?
Hope not. No,
We're not.
no. What I'm saying is
We're here
that
to save lives, sir.
right now, albumin might be a really good treatment as long as you absolutely avoid giving it to somebody who's got a TBI.
Okay.
And in fact, that was what was already done. There was a big clinical trial called the SAFE trial, SAFE. And basically, that's sort of where albumin started to go out of favor. And it was because they were finding greater mortality in TBI.
So what about like patients, if you were to give blood products, to TBI patients?
So with TBI patients, that's actually not what they normally would do. If
I
it's
know, but
just TBI and not hemorrhage,
we're multi-system trauma. Maybe you have a TBI patient that also has, the trauma. You need to give blood products. I'm imagining, okay, is that what is that going to trigger?
It's a problem. It is. We don't have an ideal solution for somebody who has hemorrhage and TBI. We don't. Like for TBI, we want to give them hypertonic saline. For hemorrhage, we want to give them blood.
Yeah.
What those two different fluids are doing are they're for different reasons. Like and so you're at cross purposes a little bit, and deciding which one to give. It's not a decision I'd want to make.
Well, right now, at that point, blood pressure would be what you would have to determine based on, right? You probably, as a doctor, you probably put a central line in, and then you just have to like keep them alive by blood pressure to balance that out. I would assume it's like really wild. So what does all this mean for paramedics?
I think that starting with 25% albumin would be a really good thing to start with. So for paramedics, it might actually be ideal especially because 25% albumin is so much more concentrated, right, than what's actually in your blood, right? 5% albumin is closer to what, the protein content of the blood would be, of plasma. 25% means that you've got so much oncotic pressure that you're going to be very quickly replacing all of the protein that was lost to the bleed. And it's actually going to pull fluid from other parts of the body, sort of.
Shift.
What I was saying in this paper that you mentioned actually at the very beginning is that I discovered actually it's not so much that it pulls fluid from other parts of the body as fluid had already been pulled from other parts of the body, but was too low in albumin content, so that it's autotransfusion, right? Autotransfused blood fluid. And as soon as you raise pressure, though, as soon as you start giving somebody resuscitation fluid, that extra autotransfused fluid gets pushed right back out again. It doesn't have enough albumin present to keep it there. It doesn't have the oncotic pressure. So you start raising hydrostatic pressure, and the fluid just extravasates again. So you're actually having to overcompensate. However much fluid you gave, you've actually only given this much because you pushed out a bunch of autotransfused fluid.
Okay.
Well, with a 25% albumin, you are in fact stabilizing that fluid. You're keeping it from going out. So it's the equivalent of pulling fluid in to give that 25%. And in my paper, I show too that the pressure increase is in fact very rapid. So you're going to reestablish blood flow in somebody very quickly with a 25% albumin. You're pulling all this fluid in. I showed that lactate got cleared really fast. So overall, I think it's probably a very good first resuscitation fluid. I wouldn't keep doing it because, as I showed, you're going to cause those side effects, not all of which are good ones.
Mm-hmm.
um, like I would give some, and then, as soon as you can, follow it up with blood products.
Mm-hmm.
You probably wouldn't need to give even as much plasma. You probably could actually focus on red blood cells at that point because that albumin has made so much plasma. Um, but so if I were researching as an EMS person, um, that is something I would love to see is a study where they start off with that. Don't keep with it, but start off with that,
Mm-hmm.
and then do other things as needed. But at least then you don't have to worry about it's something you could keep in the truck.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have to worry about refrigeration. You don't have to worry about it going bad a certain number of days. You've got a shelf life of 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very versatile and potentially very effective resuscitation fluid.
So,
So
cost really matters though, right? So I think
so
that might
compared to
be our
saline, yeah, your cost is way higher with albumin. But on the other hand, if you have more than 15 minutes, transport time, between you and the hospital, a crystalloid's just going to, it's a band-aid.
right.
Crystalloids are just going to leak right back out of the circulation, like pretty quickly. So you
Mm-hmm.
can get your pressure up, but it's not going to stay. So if you're really trying to help somebody's circulation, plasma or albumin or 25% albumin or whole blood, are definitely going to be much, much better than a crystalloid.
Well, and
Uh,
15 minutes is not even realistic because if you figure about the time that you make contact with the patient and then get them to your ambulance and then get over there, and then it takes 30 minutes or more to get a bed in the ER and get them checked in. And, they're not going to see, maybe it might be an hour, hour and a half, and that's even if they are 15 minutes away of drive time, so
yeah.
it just depends on the situation. But
So
yeah,
you better hope
that for
that
that
they're still
reason, it's
being
helpful,
given
huh?
fluid. Yeah. Uh, and of course, all the work that I've done is in controlled hemorrhage situations, or
Hmm.
almost all the work I've done. Um, so I'm not dealing with the potential for continued bleeding or re-bleeding or all these things where you're like, well, this person really did continue to lose red blood cells. We really do need to get more of them in there. Or this person really is losing, plasma still,
Hmm.
just because of that big hole in their leg, you know. um,
But because so if we do future research in this area, one of the things that could be developed would be protocols for, if this, then that with regards to balancing those things.
that would be
So
ideal.
yeah.
And I feel like in real life situations, it's going to be a lot harder to track what's going on because you probably are going to have continued bleeding that isn't controlled yet.
Hmm.
You know, maybe the tourniquet didn't stop it completely, or maybe it's a more complex injury. So it's can be really hard to tell what's going on,
Hmm.
inside, how much circulating volume is really there. Like in my studies, I can calculate it. I pretty much know, what things were at baseline. I know what I took out from hematocrit. I can be like,
Hmm.
okay, this is what the blood volume was at all these time points. This is how much plasma was there. This is how much red blood cells were there. You get into a complex injury in a person, and there's going to be a lot more uncertainty of what's, how they really are doing.
So you mentioned resuscitation earlier. Does
Mhm.
that would that include maybe an idea for first line option someday to think about for a resuscitation? Let's just give them the epinephrine and give them some albumin and see how it goes.
So in an ideal world for me, we would give, vasopressor at the same time as we were giving albumin that did not have fatty acids on it. I'd like
Okay.
to see pharmaceutical manufacturing change to where
Hmm.
we take off this um, damaging, molecule of fatty acids, and that we get the benefit another way. I don't want to have to get the benefit and also this cost. I'd like just the benefit. So I'd really like to see that combination. Now we know, you can't give a vasopressor pre-hospital without volume support. Like we've already seen that makes things worse, and it makes perfect sense with what I was talking about earlier with the autotransfusion fluid. You've got more fluid circulating because your blood pressure dropped so low, and it pulled fluid in from the rest of the body. But if you give a vasopressor, you're going to push that autotransfused fluid out. If you don't have something else to take its place, you're now even more hypovolemic than you were before.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes perfect sense that you can't give a vasopressor pre-hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're doing something like this situation, where you also have a source of oncotic pressure like albumin.
Mm-hmm.
So, like if you're giving plasma, but even then, like we said with plasma, it's not as concentrated. So, this 25% albumin is a real advantage too, so that you can make use of the autotransfused fluid. So that would be my ideal. I'd like to see some fatty acid free 25% albumin combined with a vasopressor, as close as possible to at the same time. And you're going to restore blood pressure really fast and really strong, and you're going to have great circulation. In all likelihood to any place that's not tied off with with a tourniquet. But yeah.
So this is this is exciting. I mean, and not only as a possible future, but I mean where you are right now in the research process. This is really exciting. So celebrate that for us by I don't know, give us the short version. Like, you have allowed the world to now. How would you fill in the blank? Because this, this is awesome.
Yeah. And I want this so bad. You have no idea. I want this to translate into something that really, really helps people, and I think it could. I think we've been doing things ever, wrong accidentally for decades, and that just a little tweak can make it better. And the hard part is just getting to the level of proof that gets enough attention that makes the change happen. Right now, I've got a grant application out there to look at hemorrhage plus TBI. If I can show that taking away the fatty acids prevents the TBI from getting worse, then that is, huge, because it says everything about that earlier trial that has guided, thought about albumin for years, that said, don't use this, could be thrown out. And I could say, well, this is why you shouldn't use it. It's because we've been making it wrong for so long. Albumin itself is great. Here, let's use it again.
Well, what else do you see for our future? I mean, now, not just this study and what you're doing, like what's your projection? Because I think about things like, well, I'm in the world of the Jetsons and stuff, right? About what my imagination goes.
Paramedics being able to instantly control hemorrhage, first off. Not just the ones that, extremity hemorrhage that you can put a tourniquet on, but we're getting better and better ways of stopping the truncal hemorrhage, the junctional hemorrhages, like all these places that are really hard to deal with. Like, we have a lot of people doing some really great things, and a lot of that is the military researchers, because they really care about this. Having treatments that you can spray in and form gels, like all these things are stuff that are going on right now. Things that you can, for at least for soldiers, that pre-treatment that's non-invasive, but activates all your platelets so that they're more ready to to clot as soon as you have an injury. So that's, I think, probably the nearest term thing we've got. Um, and that alone, with the move towards, just more just whole blood resuscitation, is going to solve most of the real trauma problems, that are going to hit.
That's
The
awesome, because
hard,
then we can get them to surgery.
yeah, the hard parts are still going to be that those cases where you don't have a quick route, where, maybe you're a 2-hour helicopter flight away, or in the military where you're like, well, we don't have air support anymore. You're going to be here a day before we can get you to surgery. And keeping someone alive under those conditions is going to be a real challenge. And I see that we're going to have to get involved with the neuro people. Like, it's going to take the neurophysiologists to help us figure out how to stop a person's system from just giving up, because it's your sympathetic system that keeps those blood vessels tightened, like I was talking about earlier, right? And a lot of times, when you have an early mortality, it's because your blood pressure was just plugging along and suddenly you just go tank, right? That's not because of a slow leak in blood,
Right. It's like
or
arrhythmia,
fluid.
or it's a sanguination. It's like
It's
it's
that,
something big.
something that happens that fast. That's your brain. That's your sympathetic system going like, nope, I give up. I'm dropping the ball. And your blood vessels just dilate and your pressure plummets because you're getting no blood back to your heart. And so I really think that that's going to be sort of a next step for pre-hospital care, is getting the help of the people that are experts on the autonomic nervous system, because I think that's something that we need to get them in on.
Well, it
Like,
sounds
I'm not
awesome
an
to me.
expert,
No, but
but I
this
want to
is
be.
what
I need to
this is
be.
what I wanted to hear about, because you're in a better position than me. And so, in general, do you have anything else that you want to add or share before we?
Um, there are so many things that I wish I could talk about, but they're, not things I'm allowed to talk about yet. So at least they're just too much in the um unknown phases and
I
stuff. But
understand.
but yeah,
I
no,
just want you to
it's
know that you're always welcome here. I'm really excited that we were able to connect and reach out. And I know that people are going to be excited to hear about the developments that you're doing, because, you know, being able to see the print journal is a lot different than hearing from the author, right? So it's all coming to life for us with being able to meet you. So thanks. Like many of you, I'm also an EMS instructor, so I know what it's like to have topics that are important to cover but are not actually in your curriculum. So when it comes to EMS research, I want you to know that I've been joining EMS classes lately in a virtual kind of way. It's fun for me to meet your students and talk about EMS research, or even talk about how things are done differently where I am versus where you are. So if you're an EMS instructor like me and you want to give your students a flair of what EMS research is all about, just fill out the inquiry form on my website at professorbram.com. This is professorbram.com, and I'll be in touch. I want to also invite you to check out my latest book. I co-authored it with Four Arrows, who has 2 doctorates and is an expert on indigenous scholarship and hypnosis.
We've got to look at each individual patient as a human being who is in need. And we've got to know that when we're in need, we do look to others, no matter how self-reliant we are. If we are in a situation that we've never encountered before, that self-reliance begins to seek, is there anyone that can help me with this situation? I mean, you've used a pretty drastic example with the arm cut off, but I don't care how much skill you have. There's very few people who would be able to not say, "Oh my gosh, I need help," and then all of a sudden someone shows up
With a badge.
Yeah. And you think, well, maybe this is someone that can help. Well, you said and I said that, during the first hour of trauma, people are essentially in a state of what we now know is hypnosis state.
I want to invite you to check it out because we introduce a method for communicating with patients on the scene of the emergency that takes advantage of some of the properties found in hypnosis. The book works to change the way we approach and interact with any emergency patient who's in acute distress, and it can help you be a better practitioner. The book is called Hypnotic Communication in Emergency Medical Settings for Life-Saving and Therapeutic Outcomes. Follow a link there below to find it, or you could get it almost anywhere books are sold. And if you contact me, I would be happy to mail you an autograph sticker designed to be put into the jacket cover.
Hi, I'm Will Chapleau from the International Pre-Hospital Medicine Institute. You might know about us because of the literature reviews that we post every month free to review on our website at iphmi.com. and also published through GEMS Online magazine every month. We've been doing them for 5 years, so now we've accumulated over 240 literature reviews over the past 5 years. And we've gotten feedback from our audience that said they'd like to have these things as desk references, so they'd had a rapid reference. Well, we've done it. And there are now 5 volumes of these books, one for each year that we've been publishing them. This is the latest version, volume 5. And as I said, in each of these, there's at least 48 literature reviews. They're all cataloged in the beginning of the book, so you can see what the topic area is, what pages those reviews are on, and how you can find them quickly. And again, these are a great reference whether you're putting a lecture together, working on a paper, studying, whatever it is. This gives you the depth of field of the science that dictates what we do in the field, or what we should be doing in the field, or why we've changed the way we do things in the field. In any event, as with all of our publications, we've priced these because we want you to be able to have this book. It's only $4.99 in the hard copy here. And they're all 5 of them are available at that price. But you can also get them as ebooks, and they're available as ebooks from Amazon, from Apple, from Barnes & Noble, wherever you get your ebooks for the price of $2.99. So again, we don't do this with an aim towards getting wealthy. We do these because we want you guys to be able to have these materials. Relevant information, affordable information, and an access so you can get to it. So you want the hard copies, go on Amazon, $4.99. Go to your ebook store and you get it for $2.99. If you're in the business, this is the kind of material you want to have around to settle those firehouse arguments or to help you put your materials together. Thanks again. See you all soon.
I'm doing a research project related to first responders who live in the United States, and I could use your help if you don't mind being interviewed over a video call. Go to my website and fill out the form. It's at professorbram.com, professorbram.com. I just want to thank you for listening, and I look forward to sharing more insights with you in the next episode. If you enjoy EMS research, please tell your friends and like, share, and subscribe to help others get the message.